that point where we are having our final keynote, and what a keynote it is. I want to welcome Anton Andrews from Microsoft's Global Envisioning Director. He's flown in from Seattle, and we've got a bit of an, we've got a lot of an exclusive today, not a bit of an exclusive. He's going to talk to us about Microsoft's new vision of the future of work. He's also going to play us exclusively a film. And I would ask you not to film the film on your cameras. This is a behind closed doors, exclusive one-off look at this. But this is Microsoft's vision of the future of work, and I'm looking forward to it very much. So please, will you welcome our guest speaker, Anton Andrews. Thank you.
So my voice is rapidly fading. Bear with me as it gradually diminishes. All right, can you hear me at the back okay? Yeah. So my name is Anton Andrews. I run the Office Envisioning Team back in Seattle in Redmond. And we are tasked with looking at the future of work. What an everyday productivity scenario is going to look like 5 to 10 years from now. And we're a design-led team, we're a mixed skill team, developers, designers, program managers, and so on. So we do a lot of research, sociocultural research, tech research, industry trends. And based on that research, we develop ideas, and then we bring those ideas to life, sometimes in the form of videos, like the one we'll see today, but more often actually in the form of prototypes. And because we're in the product division, those, as Misha said, those prototypes become product, and we have a company that then puts that product out. And we do this not to invent the future of productivity, we know you can't do that, but because we like to build the future, and also because we want to inspire and generate debate. And so we obviously do that with our internal engineering teams, but we also get about 6,000 to 10,000 CEOs a year through an envisioning center that we've built that has future workspaces and workplace environments, outdoor environments, domestic environments, with fully functioning experiential prototypes that you can touch, smell, and see. But before we can even start this type of work, we really have to ask what words like this even mean today. We know that work isn't a purely utilitarian thing, and yes, I managed to get the Pope into my presentation. It plays a big role in our lives as humans, and as the Pope said, without work there is no dignity. A lot of us, spend a large part of our waking lives trying to make a difference, to be recognized, to be a part of something, and sometimes just to get stuff done. So we know that work is important, but the environment that we work in is changing, and it's changing in pretty significant ways. We're moving from the age of information scarcity to an age of information abundance. And this is a pretty massive change, because the work behaviors that led to success in the old world really no longer lead to success in the new world. About 100 years ago, almost exactly, Frederick Winslow Taylor showed up at the workplace with his stopwatch. And he essentially founded the efficiency movement. I think he wrote the Principles of Scientific Management. And we still basically run companies the same way today, to do the same thing over and over at scale repetitively with maximum efficiency. Now, when information was scarce, the traditional work and management techniques founded on efficiency worked really well. We had to protect information. We spent a lot of time, because we had time, on planning and strategy. Securing and protecting knowledge was critical. Work tools were really designed for individual work, and everything was focused on achieving maximum efficiency. But when we move over to the right, and there's an abundance of data, and everyone has access to fresh information all the time, suddenly sharing and collaborating become the success factors. And networking and trust replace protectionism. Doing things together becomes a much better strategy than struggling alone. And critically, efficiency is replaced by effectiveness, which is often its polar opposite. So this is a radically different work environment. And we believe there are 5 key trends shaping them. So the first is the speed and volume of information. We're being overwhelmed, especially at work, by a flood of data and communications. This is just the amount of, in zettabytes, which is a mind-boggling number, of the amount of data stored on company servers worldwide. So the 6 zettabytes this year is projected to be about 28 company managed by 2020. So imagine working at one of these companies. Good luck finding that crucial piece of data you need. Good luck even knowing that it exists. And as Misha pointed out, it's often not connected either. Let's look at email. Your average information worker is interrupted 7 to 11 times by email an hour. And for all the men in this room, that results in a 15-point drop temporarily in your working IQ, which is the equivalent to being stoned. It's not good. So on top of that, this data is increasingly alive, and the half-time of learning is dropping. And what I mean by that, another recent study showed that in the tech field, for example, in the short space of 5 years, you can be left with as little as 15% relevant technical knowledge without constantly learning and updating. So the new normal is going to be a just-in-time knowledge environment, which is a little scary, and it's going to dramatically change the pace of work and how we work. And we're going to have to try and find ways to stay on top of this flood of information, to derive meaning from it, to make sense of it, and to not get distracted and lose focus. But speed and volume aren't the only challenges. Today's network communication tools are changing the structure of organizations. Information is flowing faster through networks than it did through traditional point-to-point tools like email. And this is shifting knowledge transfer from linear distribution to dynamic participation. And that's not just a change in communication tools. It's putting massive stress on organizations. If you think about it, these organizations were effectively designed as hierarchies to control information flow. And suddenly they're having to compete with networks which are much more open and transparent. The advantage of networked information flow, obviously, is that it unlocks tacit knowledge. And any organization that prizes innovation knows that the most valuable knowledge is the knowledge that its employees, people who work there, have in their heads. And the most hierarchical organization on earth, the US Army, which is why I have General Stanley McChrystal up here, even realized the power of this. So McChrystal, when he was running JSOC, Joint Special Operations Command, in Iraq and then Afghanistan, realized that they were a hierarchy fighting a network. And to fight a network, they had to think like a network. So he actually did this very rebellious thing. They shifted from a need-to-know basis with communications regarding insurgent warfare to a need-not-to-know basis, which was pretty radical. Essentially, they used networked communications. And suddenly they were reaching all kinds of people in their own organization who were able to reach back and help people they would have never thought to reach out to in the first place. But more importantly, this built trust and it aligned purpose in their organization in a way that created a shared consciousness. And suddenly they were operating at a much higher level. So the power of networks, they unlock tacit knowledge, they create shared consciousness in organizations. But they also speed up information exchange, and this is really critical. We often talk about this. If the information exchange happening in the world is very, very fast today as a result of this, and if the information exchange speed outside of the walls of your organization is faster than within, your organization will die. And this is a double-edged sword, of course, now, because you need to know which of those infinite conversations you need to stay tapped into. Where we work is changing too. I'm not even going to bother explaining this stat to you guys. It's an old one. There are 100 other stats like it. If we can work from anywhere, the mobility revolution is full swing now. If we can work from anywhere, why go to work? Let's look at co-working spaces. They're still proliferating. And in a recent global census, 96% of respondents cited that the main thing they looked for in a co-working space, the thing that provided value, was communities of innovation. And people choose spaces that give them access to new knowledge, that expose them to different expertise, that accelerate their learning. And we know that people value face-to-face encounters and serendipity and collaboration when these lead to more innovation. Innovation on their team, innovation in their startup, innovation in your company. Sandy Pentland of the MIT Human Dynamics Lab posited that circulating, exploring, effectively engaging with each other can actually be more valuable than individual productivity for unlocking tacit knowledge. And Ben Weber, his protege who now runs sociometrics, I think he's spoken here before, I'm sure some of you have heard him. He's actually put hard numbers against this, hard metrics, 10, 15, 25% increases in sales in pharma companies, call centers, banks, and so on. Tony Shea at Zappos in his Downtown Vegas project has recently introduced an interesting new metric, collisionable hours, collisions per hour per acre per employee. So we know that this type of serendipity works when it's targeted, to your point. It's not just random serendipity, it's serendipity that's targeted. And we believe that modern workspaces need to be designed around this. They need to provide a workscape, a spectrum of environments that allow teams and individuals to curate and put together their own work style in a way that is, and that these workscapes will be designed in a way that encourages connections. So, since social networking and loose ties are required for effective work, we see value creation shifting from the individual to the collective. That means teams are becoming more important, and those teams are becoming more diverse and distributed. They're becoming more diverse and distributed demographically, as we heard today, geographically, we also heard about that. They're also becoming distributed in terms of innovation needs, pushing organizations to work across organizational boundaries and even outside of organizational boundaries. And these teams, interestingly, we're seeing are no longer static and hierarchical, you know, the 9-to-5 employee, the team that reports to somebody. Instead, they're following more of a Hollywood model increasingly. We're seeing teams being formed around projects as needed, bringing disciplines and experts in from different organizations to work together. And this is huge, you know, because suddenly who is in control of this team? Where does the IP go? And introduces a whole set of new questions. But critically, it means that the new skills that are going to matter in the 21st century are empathy, trust, and collaboration. How are people going to come together quickly, establish mind share? How do you know what my reputation is, and vice versa? And we're going to need much better ways to work together both across distances and shoulder to shoulder. Finally, to compound all of that, as you heard earlier, the workforce is changing. 40% contingent workers by 2020. In the UK, 1 in 7 adults is now self-employed. It's the fastest growth sector here in the UK. And these free agents, from contingent staff to independent experts, are going to be playing a major role in tomorrow's workforce. The founder of LinkedIn talked recently about people going on a tour of duty rather than taking on a 9-to-5 job. And so, again, how do these people find each other? How do they attach and clump together in teams? How do they attach to organizations and then detach again? So if we step back and look at all of these changes, we believe that we're going to have to rethink productivity for the age of information abundance. And we think that really the future of work is going to be centered around people. And because it's centered around people, and because we get stuff done together more than we do alone, it's really going to need to focus on supporting our human activities at work, not desks and documents. And so we sort of condense that into 3 themes, if you like. We believe that we're going to need to collaborate with more people across more boundaries to solve bigger problems. And so we're going to need tools and environments that provide us with much better ways to come together and be together and do together. If attention is the new scarce resource, then we're going to need intelligent tools that understand our context and that can help us take advantage of that flood of information and help us make the most of every moment. And if routine work is going to be largely automated, which we're increasingly hearing, and we live in this new fast-moving real-time information environment, then creative work is going to be where the emphasis is. And we're going to need tools and environments that let us really think and work creatively, freely, organically, the way our brains work. So we've been taking a look at what that might look like, and we've been prototyping hardware, software, and environments. And we also recently made a video that brings some of this to life in a slightly more portable way, which I'm going to show you today. So before I start, I'd like to introduce our two main characters, Kat and Lola. Kat is a free agent. She's a young, independent marine biologist, and she's a kelp expert. She's engaged with research institutes and schools, but she's always on the lookout for her next gig, her next job, to put some money in the bank. Lola, on the other hand, is an executive. She lives in the corporate world. She runs, she's putting a team together around a new kelp bioprocessing facility, and she's on the lookout for an expert to put on her team. So that was a lot in 6 minutes. Let's unpack what we just saw. So instead of going scene by scene, I'm actually going to use the same 3 thematic clusters that we looked at earlier. Let's start with togetherness. If people are going to get stuff done together more than we do alone, and if more value is created by teams, we sort of have a problem because most of our productivity tools are designed for individual workers sitting at individual desks. Can we create productivity environments that give us truly better and richer ways of working together? So right at the beginning, one of the very first things you see in the movie is this idea of high empathy presence, that you can be with someone even if you're not there. And we see Kat diving, and suddenly someone inks in her field of view, and a conversation starts. And it turns out she's in a classroom full of kids, or she has a classroom full of kids with her on the dive. And one of them, a mute girl, is actually signing and being translated as they talk about a wandering sea anemone. And they can see the world through her eyes, and it's as if they're there with her. This is something we have several prototypes against right now. It's very, very interesting. Similarly, when Lola's at home, we see her catch up with her dad. And I don't know if you noticed when she walked past the screen, she has this sort of hot link to her dad's home. The perspective shifted. And again, this is a new technology. We have Ultra HD, stereoscopic 3D displays that have real parallax. So it's not like a screen like this screen where everything's flat on the surface. And they're able to have this very realistic discussion face to face. And he's just been on a 5K run, and he's actually able to show off the data coming from his knee implant. We were just talking about the Internet of Things. And the notion of high empathy presence also comes back in the lab. Lola's not there, but she's able to work together with her team, shoulder to shoulder. And here we're using the same avatar technology that Hollywood uses. So she looks like she normally looks. We're not changing the way she looks, but her gaze and placement are corrected. And we're able to focus on the parts of her that matter for body work, for emotional presence. So the parts of her that don't matter are faded out. She can look people in the eye, and she can interact with the same graphics that they're interacting with on the whiteboard. And what we don't show here is that she's actually using a tablet on her end. But collaboration is bigger than just high empathy presence. We believe that work is going to be organized around team activities, and so that blackboard that we were just looking at is really creating an environment in that space. It's creating an environment that is a multi-user environment with its sensors and cameras. So you saw them all interacting simultaneously, some using ink, some using voice, some using gesture, some using a mobile device. And because this all works together, it becomes very easy for them as a team to sort of jive together. And we believe that conversations will form the backbone of activity and project activity. And we're working on digital canvases, and you saw a little glimpse of one, that literally allow teams to get on the same page together. And here we saw Kat and 2 of her colleagues effortlessly collecting and discussing notes, and then authoring a post. But with fluid teams and networks, it's going to be more and more important to connect with and find the right people. Experts who can help you with something you need to know that maybe you weren't aware of. And what we see happening here is this Ask the Author card pops up when she digs into a piece of data. she can actually find the author of that piece of data and then maybe establish a relationship and go deeper and find out more about why he drew a certain conclusion, or how he collected that data, or why he posted that item. But let's look at time and attention. If attention is the new scarce resource, not information, how can we help people make the most of every moment? What if instead of running after information, contextually aware systems could bring the right things to us at the right time, helping us stay focused and informed? So we open the movie with Kat diving, and these strange-looking diamonds that you saw floating in the water are actually holograms. So that's contextual information on her dive that is placed on her dive rail, showing her information that is important for her dive at that moment, at that time and place. Somebody else diving there would not see the same thing. Later, she walks into the cafe and puts her mobile device down, and she gets the cafe menu at the bottom of her screen. And again, in this case, a contextual engine is bringing the right experience to her at the right time. When she opens her flexible notebook, by the way, all of the display technologies that you saw are all real. When she opens her flexible notebook, she sees feeds, and in this case, on the left, you see a personal feed, and on the right, you see a more work-based feed that she's created. And these feeds draw on multiple apps to surface information to her, again, at the right time, in the right place, based on what she's doing and what she's interested in. And this keeps her informed, and it boosts serendipitous discovery on the one hand, but on the other hand, it also maintains focus by eliminating distractions. And we see an even stronger example of this when she enters the co-working space to prepare for the meeting. And she puts in these biometric earpieces that not only play music, but they sense galvanic skin response, respiration, heart rate. And there's actually, believe it or not, an algorithm that can detect when you're going into a state of flow based on those three things. And once it detects that, the system goes into a do not disturb mode, which essentially suppresses incoming communications. When we think about smarts, we also think about how assistive intelligence can help you focus on what matters. And the bracelet scene was really about that. It's about predictive intelligence. So Kat's out on the town with her friends. When a message comes in, Cortana draws her attention, her personal digital agent draws her attention to the fact that an important work offer has come in with a meeting the very next morning. And because it knows a little bit about her and where she is, and it can learn and anticipate some of her needs and habits, in this case, it notices that she has a brunch booked for the next morning. She's probably going to need to prepare, and so it proposes that she might want to move brunch. She might need a calm space to prepare before the meeting, and it presents options to do those things in a very polite way. She's still firmly in control, but with 3 clicks, or in this case, 3 simple gestures, she gives the go-ahead. Brunch is moved, meeting is accepted, a co-working space is booked on the way home, and a bicycle route is mapped out, almost without her doing anything. And so this allows her to focus on the what rather than the how. In another scene, we saw Lola transferring a phone call to a wall, and what we see here is her phone call with one of her colleagues on the left being transcribed so that she has a history. But on the right, you see it being augmented with relevant data. And again, she didn't have to pull up her files and what is that thing that he's referring to, and the same with him. That data was just pulled up automatically for them based on what they're saying. Further on in the story, right at the end, they're watching the live feed of crop data from their underwater drones. And again, this is augmented with real-time analysis and predictions. In this case, predicted crop yield, and later showing a likely harvest date. So in all of these cases, intelligent assistance is eliminating rote tasks, helping them focus on what they're actually trying to get done. But the third theme is perhaps the most important and the closest to our hearts, which is this idea of friction-free creativity. If we, and organizations are going to need to learn and respond faster, and if information half-life is dropping, and if rote tasks are being automated, then creative work is going to be increasingly valued. And if it's true, that our world is soon going to be full of sensors and devices that we can make use of as we move through them, how can we then use these environments to better support our creativity? So we've been prototyping environments that we call friction-free, that let us work very naturally and spontaneously. We want to be able to move across locations and devices as we get things done. And we sort of have this idea of using our mobile device as a personal center point. And in the new bio facility, we see how Kat and her team enter. Facial recognition picks up on the team, and they're able to very quickly resume their workspace and just pick up where they left off. Now that brainstorm that they're resuming might have started in a different building, a different country, might have been on mobile devices. They're able to pick up and resume here on this wall surface. And we're actually currently experimenting with rehydrating entire rooms based on the sensors and displays in that space. And there's, of course, you can then use your personal mobile devices to do private work and to shuttle back and forth between private thinking and public thinking, if you like, team thinking and personal thinking. But the ability to see things on the wall side by side, to step back and work together, really presents a whole different modality where you can let things grow, let ideas grow. Same thing with Lola transferring the phone call. She's able to move into a much richer mode of interaction. And she didn't book a room to do that. She just took advantage of some random space in her company. And finally, at the co-working space, we saw Kat walk in and use a touchdown desk. She connected through her mobile device to the touchdown desk, which set itself to her ergonomic settings. And then based on the invitation, immediately presented her with a focused set of content so that she could get started. But creativity requires a lot more than just fluidity across spaces. How will we access information, express ideas, and tell stories in the real-time world? And we believe that people increasingly want to make sense of information on the spot. And this is what we see Lola doing on the glass wall as she embarks on a search for a candidate for her team. She isn't calling up content that somebody else has prepared. She's invoking raw data, and that raw data is being visualized for her in real time using data viz engines. And she's digging in and exploring it conversationally and on the fly. This is a very powerful tool, and it's something we've started to prototype very successfully. And same thing with Kat. We see her using, in this case, a glasses-free holotable to make potential changes to the design of the kelp farm, and she's able to reach in and model and visualize different outcomes, different predicted outcomes on the fly. The technology for this is something that's pretty exciting, and it looks set to come online in the next 4 years or so, even though it looks pretty outlandish right now. And then finally, earlier in the cafe, we saw Kat assembling data and authoring new content with her colleagues, and she's able to easily remix it into a style of her choice. So she could go in and tweak things, but we believe the idea really here is that modern content is easy to assemble and share, and that you can put most of your work and energy into the actual content rather than into messing about with Word documents with big ribbons and formatting and all that kind of stuff. And in fact, we've just launched a new app called Sway that lets you do a lot of this today already. Actually, I'll show one more thing. Finally, once you've created that outcome, the resulting document is not a static, dead document. It's a living document that's full of living information. She's able to tear information open out of the video. There's a social feed running in the document. So the idea is that this thing is alive. So if we look at what that all means, the message that I'd like you to take away from this is really a fresh definition of productivity. We're moving away from this industrial model of productivity that was all about efficiency, that's about mechanization, that's about repetition. And instead, we're moving to a definition that's about people. It's about people bringing forth new value through human ingenuity and creativity. It's about, instead of just doing more in less time. It's about building inspired communities that work like a network and solve bigger problems. It's about individuals being able to focus their time and attention on the things that matter to them. And it's about the ability for all of us to work anywhere with a new type of clay, real-time information. And we think of this as making work human, and ultimately, this is our vision for the future of productivity. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a fantastic vision. What an amazing perspective for the future. And I'm delighted that Anton shared that with us. And what strikes me is as a futurist, as someone who envisions, we need people like Anton and his colleague Harold Becker, who's going to join us on stage to help shape these futures. So in the few minutes that are left, I'd like to have a quick dialogue with Anton and Harold, if that's okay. So please join me
Sure.
on stage. Your voice has held out really well. I'm impressed, Anton. And I mean, what strikes me is we've heard some contradictions, and I think there are some contradictions and tensions in what we're seeing. You know, on the one hand, technology for a long time has been shown to enable mobility and distributed work, and yet we're hearing now about people coming together and being together and collaborating, which builds on the adjacent possible and the things we've heard from others. So what is your broader definition of mobility and togetherness, and how do the two coexist, or where are the tensions in your view?
Well, we think we're in the full swing. The mobile revolution is in full swing right now, and it's maturing. We think 5 to 10 years from now it will have matured. And right now we're very, very focused on these devices that we have in our pockets and the small ones that we can hold in our hands. But I think once the mobility revolution really matures, it'll allow us to walk around and make use of the spaces and the cities that we live in. And those architectural environments will become part of being mobile. Right now we see them as static, but I actually think that is mobility in a way. And we see display technologies really rapidly reducing in cost. I mean, that blackboard that you saw came down 75% in cost in the last 2 years. Actually, it came down 75% within the last 14 months. And so, 5, 10 years from now, they'll be 2 millimeters thick. They'll be made of plastic. They won't be heavy glass like this. And it'll be a lot easier to equip buildings, cities, entire sort of workspaces with surfaces that can respond in some way. And when you have that, and when you have sensors everywhere and actuators everywhere, you'll be able to really use mobility to its full extent rather than just looking into a very small glowing rectangle.
What he said.
Same, yes. And I mean, people together, what is the need for people to be together physically when you can bring people in virtually? How do you see the two working together? Because I think what was a paradox for me, and I remember a head of knowledge management talking about the idea we have the wrong people in meetings. The most useful people are the ones that you can now bring in.
Right.
So who comes together physically in the future, and who brings the virtual experience?
Well, right now we have some odd sort of ways of being together at work. You're either not together in an office, or you're together in a bad way in an open plan space. Both of those are terrible ideas. Or you're together in a meeting room, which also isn't really very effective. Meetings, it seems, are a waste of time by most people in them. And so when we think about togetherness, we don't think about meetings or being together in an open plan workspace. We think about elective togetherness. We're together because we actually want to work on something together, and because I want you to be in the same space as me, and I want to be in the same space as you. And you might be physically present, in which case we think about ways of making that better. Or you might not be, like you said, in which case we try and think about ways of making remote presence more high empathy. And all of the remote presence technologies that we have today are not what I would call high empathy, at least the way they're implemented right now.
I would add, may I?
Yes, absolutely.
I would add to that it will be a blend in the future. It's not an either or, physical presence and virtual presence. We will see tools that will make remote collaborations actually arguably more effective than face-to-face meetings without having access to these tools. Things where you can model data together. Look at what we saw Kat doing on the whole table, but if you could do this together with somebody else, whether virtual or in the room, it becomes very powerful.
Yeah.
And then I think it's also ultimately, for me, why when I come to the office and hang out with Anton and some of my colleagues, it's just fun. And maybe it goes back to love. It's just more fun being with them than looking at them, even if it's a fancy display. And I think one of the reasons why you guys are all here, it still beats watching this show on your display, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we sort of redefine meetings as living conversations. A living conversation is really interesting. If the three of us are here right now and we're brainstorming something, maybe we're talking about the MIT and we can just pull things up as we're talking and dig into things and then, have somebody join us because we need, spur of the moment, we decided that, hey, wouldn't it be great to reach out to so-and-so? That becomes a very valuable discussion. It becomes a living conversation, as opposed to a meeting that was booked a week ago and we're not even sure the right people are in it, and oh, that I didn't bring that with me, and that's just not as interesting. And that's very much defined by the old world of information scarcity, whereas now you have this ability to access fresh information on the fly. Let's use it. But it means we need to really rethink and redefine our tools. Same with mobility, and you asked earlier, how do we think about mobility? Mobility is fundamentally redefining how we think about all of our work tools. And especially Microsoft, you can imagine, you're well known for things like Office, Word, PowerPoint, things that probably most people in this room have used. And we think of someone authoring a document as sitting down at a desk and having a big monitor and a keyboard and a mouse, and I need all that to author my document. No, you don't. Now you can author a document in 2 minutes on a cell phone. And so, we're really beginning to, you're not authoring the same document in the same way though. You're doing something very, very different. And that's what's interesting to me, is that the nature of work is changing and the nature of the things that we need to support is changing. And I think for you guys, looking at it from a workspace and workplace perspective, and from a valuable, effective square footage perspective, it's the same thing. Like, the things that we're doing are changing. How do we support those new activities as opposed to the old ones where we needed to put, as you were saying, Mark, like meeting rooms and offices, these fixed things that really are not very valuable anymore into the space.
So you mentioned just-in-time knowledge environments, which I think is really exciting, but also quite scary.
It's quite scary
for some people, isn't it? You never stop, you're always live. I mean, what we've seen is that often workspaces are becoming dumber over the years. The technology has left the desk and has evaporated to the cloud and has been carried by people. But what we're seeing now is actually a contrast to that surfaces have intelligence, so the building will become more connected. What's your view of the dumb container versus a vision of the future, which is perhaps more intelligence, and that's in that definition?
I think we're going through a phase where technology is heavy and costly and hot. So heavy, costly, hot stuff that is redundant 2 years from now, you don't want to put in your drywall. And that's obviously something that is resulting in us cleaning out the spaces, because right now the most intelligent thing you can do is bring your mobile device into the space, which makes the space intelligently usable at least. What we see happening is that tech is becoming lighter and cheaper and cooler and more efficient. And as that happens, I think we'll see that trend reversing again. The pendulum will swing back to some degree. And I think to some degree we will continue down this very modular Lego path where you bring things in to the workspace. It's never, I don't think we're proposing that you have workspaces where the heavy, heavy tech is built in to every room. I mean, that would be crazy. But I think there will be larger forms of lightweight tech that you can play with, in addition to the things we carry in our pockets.
And I think if there's any questions from the audience, we've got time for one question, I think. Does anyone want to show of hands? Let's go to the gentleman here. There's a microphone coming. If you could just tell us who you are first.
Hi, I'm Mark, and the most important thing you need to know about me is that my little girl's going to be 5 in a few weeks, and I'm absolutely amazed at everything you guys are producing. To get the greatest acceleration and benefit of that, how do we get that into education soon?
Education. So education is a difficult topic because to some degree you can question whether technology is the problem. I think education is facing a lot of issues. We're actually about to embark on a big education initiative a year ago with our team, and we pulled back because we felt that we'd be coming in heavy-handed with technology, and we didn't want to do that. I think that there are a lot of things that need to be sorted out in education before we throw technology at it. The USA has the most tech-heavy education system in the world, and is not the best performer in the world. So I'll leave it at that.
Hi, Peter Miskovich. Great presentation. In fact, I'd love to get that version of PowerPoint or Sway as soon as it's available. You show a lot of human-to-human collaboration via these new technologies. In terms of cognitive computing and human-to-machine collaboration, what are your thoughts there? And will we be, I mean, there are those, at IBM and actually Accenture, very focused on human-to-machine collaboration and knowledge sharing. And actually the human component focused more on the management of the machine learning and the machine activities. And the human-to-human activities may, in some people's perspectives, may be diminished over time. Any thoughts there from Microsoft?
Sure. I hate the term human-computer interaction, HCI. I don't think that's what we strive for at all. I think we're if you're engaged, we want to be engaged in the work that we're doing and the stuff that we're working on. And instead of thinking about the human-machine interaction, I sort of think about the interaction that the person has with their own mind. If they're not interacting with other people, then they're interacting with their own mind, essentially, and with the knowledge around them. And what we actually show a lot of what you might call HCI or human-machine interaction in that video and in our prototypes, but it doesn't feel like it. And the reason it doesn't feel like it is that you're working very organically. You're using conversational interaction with intelligent agents. You're using ink, you're using touch, you're using gesture. It's very free-flowing. And that is a much more natural form of work. The way we think and the way we work is messy. We're messy human beings. And sort of allowing that messiness to exist in the way we create is really what we're after, rather than sort of saying, if you want to work on something, hey, now you have to choose, is it a PowerPoint, is it a Word document? I don't know. Like, I haven't even fully formed the idea yet. And so having this sort of creative canvas that you can work on, and then gradually expand your ideas, and as they take shape, the right tools come to you gradually, and the right apps, first-party apps, third-party apps, we don't care, come to you gradually, and you're able to make use of the power of those things as your thinking evolves. And then as the project evolves, whether it's the holiday that you're planning with your family or whether it's a work project, you can start inviting people in, it starts taking on milestones, it starts snowballing, it becomes more official. We think of it that way. We think of it as we call it the journey from informal to formal. And right now, there really aren't any work tools by anyone that support that journey from informal to formal. So great question. Thank you.
I think a final thought, I think we can add time, but I want to just leave on a final thought from Harold and Anton. I mean, in this room, I guess we're all about shaping the future of our companies and the companies we advise. And predicting the future is difficult. You both created a phenomenal vision of the future. So as envisioners, I'm interested in personally, how do you envision the future? What is the secret about how you can shape something which is so well articulated?
I would start with the thought that this is not the work of Anton and Harold. This is the work of a fairly sizable community that's been informed by a network that's not just sitting in Redmond. And to me, that is, I've been doing trans research for many, many years now. That's how I landed. It's finding some of the most interesting people and having conversations and playing with ideas, and then spending a lot of time wallowing in those ideas. Probably the longest phase of the production of this film was in the planning and the shaping of the scenarios that took us, what, like 6, 7 months? And then we went shooting, and that took some time, and then we did post-production, and there's other long phases. But that was by far the most significant amount of time that we spent on this. And it's the interaction with interesting people, some of who we met here at Worktech or in other conferences, that really helped us, I think, the most in shaping some of those ideas.
Yeah, we're called the Envisioning Team. It says envisioning on our business cards, but I'd hesitate to say that this is a vision of the future, because that makes it feel like it's something that's correct. We absolutely do not believe that this is correct. This is a sort of, I used to be a genetic engineer, and in science you find a hypothesis, and then you do your best to destroy that hypothesis. And so that's the way we work. We posit ideas, and we do that, as Harold said, by working with a lot of teams inside and outside of Microsoft. So inside Microsoft, we have our product divisions that we work with, and we're in a product division. We're not, sales or something. And so we work with engineers on a daily basis. But then we also get outside of our bubble, and we work with future forecasters and trend watchers, but also just with subject matter experts outside of Microsoft to get their take on things. And we go visit tech labs outside of Microsoft and so on. So there's a huge sort of pool of ideas that we're drawing on, and then we try and synthesize that into things that are provocative, that we think will provoke our engineering teams. And then we go make a prototype and we build it. And 90% of the time we step back and say, oh shit, that's not what I thought was going to happen. And so that's why I hesitate to sort of talk about a vision of the future, because it sounds very grand. And I think we change our vision every 5 minutes. It's a constant state of learning that you're in. And I really think about it that way. But I think it's also critical to be involved in the product team. Otherwise it becomes this blue sky thing. And no one's interested in a blue sky thing. We're really interested in productizing every idea. And that doesn't mean turning exactly what you saw into some feature that gets put into some product, but it means influencing a product division through our prototypes and through our work enough that they actually change their mind about what they're going to build. And that happens because they're involved, not because we're a team telling them what to do.
Well, I think it's a wonderful way to finish Worktech, and I feel very honoured to have Harold and Anton join us to present their narrative and journey. Thank you so much.